But I love it because I think it's the soul. It's who we were created to be. And it's that journey back to who we were designed to be, because life gives us all these expectations: go to school, go to college, get married, do all these agendas, and sometimes it gets blurred out. And for me, it was a real spiritual journey of going back to who was I created to be and how do I ignite that part of me again. And then when you're living, alive and on fire like that, you inspire other people. They'll say, well, hey, how do I do that as well?
Welcome to the In the Flow Unscripted podcast, where we talk about science, religion, culture, life, business, whatever we feel like talking about, because it is completely unscripted. There is no agenda but transformation. And so we are excited today to have another phenomenal guest. Today we have with us Rachel Marie Martin, and she is an author, influencer, and speaker who believes in the power of the human spirit to overcome, to thrive, and to find deep joy, and I love that. In 2008, these beliefs led her to start Finding Joy, a website and brand that reaches millions of monthly visitors and boasts over 1 million followers on social media. She is the author of The Brave Art of Motherhood, Mom Enough, and the founding partner of the In Audience Industries, a company that trains and equips entrepreneurs in their ventures. And currently, she's about to release the book, Get Your Spark Back. So welcome to the Flow, Rachel Marie Martin.
I'm super glad to be here. Excited to see where this conversation goes today.
Well, I'm gonna share just a second just about how this happened. So her husband happened to listen to one of the podcasts and said, I really want my wife to be on this. She's going to really connect with this. She loves this. So that got me super excited to have somebody who really saw the value and the intention of what we are doing with the In the Flow podcast. And so I was more than happy to accept the invitation. And so she's here with us. So I want to start just a little bit, just kind of, Simon Sinek talks about what's your why. Mm-hmm. And with this new book coming out, tell me what the why was behind this new book.
For me, the why was there are so many people that would email me all the time saying, how do I get my spark back? They never emailed saying, how do I get a spark? It was always possessive, which meant they knew they had it. They owned it. And then they always added the word back, which also means they knew they want it back. Like if you've ever had toddlers, they will go and fight for whatever toy that somebody else took. And so for me, it's listening. As a writer and storyteller, I really listen to the people I write to. And I had gone through my own journey. I think it was kind of during COVID and that pandemic time when when normal got shaken up. And because I went through the journey of trying to figure out my spark again in life, I thought they're asking me and I'm going to write this story and really write what it took to do that and debunk the questions that come in our minds that I think are kind of like the brakes on us trying to do something new and exciting. They're like the worries. And I just wanted to say, listen, life is too short to let these questions stop you.
That's wonderful. We're going to dive in a little bit spiritually here for just a second, because what's amazing about what you're saying is they recognize they need their spark back. Mm-hmm. And what's really fascinating when it comes to like scripture, we're just going to go here for just a second, but many of the words in scripture when it comes to us are re-words, mm-hmm. renewal, redemption, reconciliation. And the power of the re-word is that it doesn't mean you're like, for example, the word make you to renew your mind. It doesn't mean to make your mind new. You're not moving to something that is foreign to you. In other words, you are bringing your mind back to its always intended potential. And so it's not a difficult thing to do when you recognize, and there's such hope in that. It's like, I want to get back to the thing and the person that I was designed to be. And I love that about what you're trying to do, and that people recognize that, because a lot of people don't,
Yeah, I would agree with you. Like, I love the because I even use reignite your life in the tagline for it. But I love it because I think it's the soul. It's who we were created to be. And it's that journey back to who we were designed to be, because life gives us all these expectations: go to school, go to college, get married, do all these agendas. And sometimes it gets blurred out. And for me, it was a real spiritual journey of going back to who was I created to be and how do I ignite that part of me again. And then when you're living, alive and on fire like that, you inspire other people. They'll say, well, hey, how do I do that as well? And then, I always believe the truth that we've learned, where there's light, there can't be darkness. And if there's more of us living in alignment with who we were created to be, we are light in this world.
I love that. I'm a body mechanics person, and one of the things that I have really understood and is pretty revolutionary thought is that your body is in many cases its own independent entity, and it likes things and rewards you based on what you do to it. Normally, your body wants to stay in a state of homeostasis where it's just kind of self-regulating, self-functioning. As you perturb it with, let's say, working out or eating healthy, it rewards you by moving up to that next level, and then that becomes its next state of homeostasis, right? But when you are in your passion, when you're in your joy, the last podcast we had, we talked about passion for about 45 minutes. When you're in your passion and just something as ridiculous or as wild as cutting your hand, let's say you cut yourself on a piece of glass, the wound on your hand heals 4 times faster with someone who's in love, in passion, in joy, than it does on someone who is more bitter or habitually angry. Now, what the heck is that about, right? You're just like, your body is literally rewarding you. It's like, I want to get back to a healthy state, versus the body saying, I don't really care.
Right. That kind of, it is what it is. Yeah, I listened to that podcast and I loved the idea of saying yes. Like, don't say no right away. Say yes. And for me, this whole year has been that too. I always choose a word of the year. I've done it for over a decade. And it's amazing when you do that, like to see like, wow, that year really encompassed that. And this year it was confidence. And there's been so many things that I've just decided, I'm just going to say yes. I mean, in where I live, there's this place where there's a cryo chamber. And a friend of mine's like, hey, do you want to try it? And my initial instinct is no. I don't want to go to 156 degrees below zero. But I said yes. And it was the most exhilarating thing ever. And it proves to you, like, when you push that little bit of uncomfortable, you like exactly what you're saying, it becomes a little bit farther that you can go. I have many people, because I'm a runner, that say, well, I could never run. And I said, well, I don't expect you to run a mile the first time. What if you run to your stop sign and then you call it a day? And then the next day you run to the stop sign and you run 5 more feet. Pretty soon running to that stop sign is going to be nothing. But you have to be willing to go through that process of pushing uncomfortable.
Tying it into, and you obviously know this too, we had a neuroscientist on one of the podcasts, I think it was podcast 3. And what's fascinating about what you just said is there's such neuroscientific grounding to it, because your brain literally creates a synaptic path around actions. And if the action is too revolutionary for the brain to process, your body will reject it and will not build the synaptic path necessary to have it happen. So for example, if you say, hey, I want to gain 20 pounds of muscle, and you go into the gym and the very first day you lift for 90 minutes and you're lifting the heaviest weights you've ever lifted and you try to go in again, your brain cannot process and build strength on that moment. And so you go, well, why don't I feel like doing this again? I don't feel like it. But if you go in and you lift 10 pounds and then you lift 12 pounds, you lift 15 pounds, it's your body is making a leap. And then once it makes that leap and it gets rewarded for it, like you go, I look good today. That produces dopamine and serotonin in the body, and it strengthens that neuronal pathway. Mm-hmm. And now your body wants to do it again and again and again. Much of life, the neuroscience is kind of recognizing a couple things. One, we're recognizing the value of dopamine and the value of serotonin, the value of these neurotransmitters. But we're also recognizing that we're designed to go from, and literally this is just scriptural, but go from glory to glory. Mm-hmm. Like to constantly be improving the body and the life and the experiences that we have. So you're tracking neuroscientifically, not just like as a cool concept. I mean, you're right there with it. So that's awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you. I remember hearing maybe 20 years ago, a minister talk about switching your thought process, and he compared it to like ruts in your brain. And he said it was like streams. And if you think of a little stream, it's this deep rut. And to change the process, you have to not only get it out of that deep rut, but you have to have that constant kind of the effort of, okay, I'm going to push it over here. I'm going to push it over here. And that to me is part of the journey. Like in 2022, I ran 1,000 miles, and people have asked me like, well, how did you do that? And there were so many different points in that journey. Not starting can be almost easier than when you're at month 3 and the goal is like, oh my gosh, it's so huge.
Daunting.
But I knew I have to keep pushing into that space until it became not a habit, because I kind of shy away from that, but more a lifestyle. I started to identify as a runner. That was what I did. That's what I did in the morning. And that subtle shift in who you are can really make a difference on those days when you're like, I do not feel like running. But if you identify as I'm a runner, then you just do it anyway.
All right. Fantastic. I love that. So let's talk a little bit about, one of the things that you describe a lot in your books and on your website, findingjoy.net, is the connecting people to their stories and getting them to understand and recognize the opportunity of the story. And so I want to share something with you that I've been working on. I'm a script writer. And what I've realized in the world and in life is that we exist inside a giant cosmic drama. Now, what does that mean? That means that literally, as a script writer, when I write a story, I play, in many cases, God in the world that I create. I set the stage, I set the characters, I set the environment. Everything is based on what I create. But more than that, I have an agenda for my story. And that agenda is central to the entire story. So the idea is that you can, the more central you are to the agenda of the scriptwriter, the more the scriptwriter has to move heaven and earth to accomplish their agenda in the role of the story. Now, the character in the story doesn't recognize it.
Right.
But the secondary and tertiary characters in the story just aren't as central to the agenda, so they're not in the story as much. So the idea in the cosmic drama is 2 things. 1, understand what the agenda of the story writer is, macro level, right? The spiritual story writer from this perspective. And then if you understand that, then you can exist as a secondary, tertiary, or almost non-existent character. But if you are central to the agenda, this is why Jesus says, seek first the kingdom. And literally, it's a script writing reality. Seek first the kingdom, you'll be the central character, and then everything in the story will be added unto you. So it's not like we don't have control in our lives. It's just the more connected to the agenda we are, the more the scriptwriter moves heaven and earth to see that agenda happen, which then allows us to recognize that it's not just that you're doing great things in the world, but you're doing amazing things that the scriptwriter wants you to. So he keeps bringing these things to bear in your life so that you can accomplish not just your agenda, but his agenda.
That is very powerful. And it's such a good reminder too, because sometimes when you're in the story, I'm just going to step back to even my own story. Sometimes when you're in it, you're like, I don't even know about this or what's happening. But I look at some of the things in my life where I hid the most. A decade ago, 15 years ago, I was in a not great marriage, terrible finances, really, really bad. And I worked really hard to portray to the world, like everything's together, I've got it together, I'm a good mom, all that stuff. But I always tell people, when you do that, you don't use any time to actually work on what you're hiding from. And it wasn't until I decided I'm gonna admit where I am, my reality, and come and talk about it and talk about this path of healing. Well, fast forward 8 years from that, and a couple of years ago, I end up on national television talking about finances, talking about women and finances, talking about rightly ordered finances. The very place I had hid from became the very place that I ended up spreading light and helping people heal from that story. And I think that's a really powerful thing, is sometimes when you're in the middle, you don't know. You don't know, but you keep stepping forward in faith. I would keep doing that. Like, I don't maybe have the answers, but I can keep moving forward.
It's really interesting, and you bring up the word faith, and people tend to look at this word from a spiritual perspective and this kind of thing. And I just see it this way. Everything for me is always like a story and a metaphor. Faith is basically connecting to a being or a God that knows the end from the beginning and operating in the same understanding and the same circumstance. What do I mean by that? So let's say you and I are going to go see the movie, or you're sitting at my house and you've never seen the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And so we decide we're going to watch. It's an all-day thing. We got the popcorn, we got the Red Bulls. We're just going to go through the whole day. We're going to watch Lord of the Rings. And 10 hours into watching this, you've journeyed with Frodo, you've laughed with Pippin and Merry, you've had a blast, you've cringed as Sauron gets to where he gets. And all of a sudden, Frodo gets shish kebabbed by the spider Shelob. Okay? And it looks, the dark music, somber music plays, and everything's over. You have not seen the movie. You're freaking out. I'm right next to you, sucking on my Red Bull, eating my popcorn, and just looking over at you, and you're just like looking at me like, what the heck? Like, why did I invest the last 10 hours? The only difference between you and I is you're watching it linearly, and I already know the end from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not worried because I know 3 minutes later it was just this happened and Frodo's going to be okay.
Right.
Faith is living in that linear moment and recognizing that you're going to celebrate what you don't see yet. Faith is the evidence of things not seen. That is the unseen for you, is what's going to happen to Shelob. But you're looking over at me and saying, well, he's not freaking out.
Right.
So there must be something better coming.
Right.
Right. We self-fulfill our own prophecies when we look at our circumstances and even petition on our circumstances. Oh, this is terrible. Oh,
Right.
Instead of going, you got this, and celebrate the victory you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, there is that. As a storyteller, as a writer, I can see that in what we do. I always ask, whether it's a book I'm writing or a speech that I'm giving or a blog post that I'm writing, my question always is, how will it end? Like you were saying, that macro. What do I want the person sitting in the audience to tell her friend about it? That's the question I ask often. Like if it's a book, what is she going to say to her friend that says, you need to read this? This is why it's impactful. Without that answer, it's like just throwing darts out there. So I have to become crystal clear on that part of the journey, of that part of it. And then I think it's a cool thing, the storytellers that are on this planet, is we get the ability to create a story where somebody else reading it can see themselves within it. And in the seeing of themselves, they get hope, they get the possibility, they get the idea like, hey, maybe I could actually do that. Whether it's Lord of the Rings or some article that you're writing, it's that seed that gets planted in their mind thinking, you know what, I can do this. And I think that's the huge gift of being a storyteller, is it's maybe not even just the story, it's the way that we give hope to other people.
So you just nailed something, and this now gets into the culture side of this podcast. Basically, in this situation, today's movies no longer contain what you just said. And we leave the theater going, that didn't resonate. We don't know why, but that didn't resonate because they don't follow the principles of script writing as it pertains to real life. That's why we love movies that are based on real life circumstances and real life stories, right? But we're left now with movies where the anti-hero is celebrated. That goes against the very fabric of reality, the very way existence operates. You know, there's a guy by the name of Joseph Campbell who has passed away, but was just a brilliant theorist, idea man. And he wrote the book Hero's Journey and a number of other books. And he talks about in there that you have those situations where you go through the conflicts and you must defeat the dragon to get to the next level. Nowadays, the dragon is the hero of the film.
Yeah, I can see that. You know, it makes me wonder with my teenagers if that's why they don't resonate as much with film. Like I'll say, hey, do you guys want to go see a movie? And they're like, not really. Whereas when I was young, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to go sit in the theater and watch Apollo 13. I wanted that experience with my dad, but I wanted to see that grit of human spirit. Like my favorite part in that whole movie is the moment when the engineers get in a back room and they have to fit some filter that's a square into a circle.
I knew you were going to say that. Absolutely.
It's so inspiring. And what's cool for me is my kids don't want to go to the theater. But if we pull out an old movie and they watch it with us, well, they enjoy it. They'll say, "Oh, I really like that movie." And I now I can see what you're saying. Like, I'm wondering if it's because they're craving that hero. They're craving that person, that possibility, like, I can do hard things too.
And when you don't, what you connect to is any sense of community that will support you, whether that's a riot culture, whether that's a group that can produce self-harm, whatever that ends up being, that is what you lean to, because we desire that inspiration, that value, that thrill, that one. I'm going to say wonder. I'm going to sum it all up in wonder. If we don't have wonder, we'll settle for anyone that'll accept us in community.
Yeah. You know, I think it was on your previous podcast with Peter where he said something about social media and the danger of it, where everything it conforms to what it wants you to hear. So if you're into, all of a sudden you read that article and it's a little bit different, and then all of a sudden the algorithm fills that and it feeds that. And I love the word wonder, because wonder, I believe it frees us up. It frees us up to make a different path. It allows you to not have the pressure of making the decision. I'll often tell my kids, what if you just wondered about what it would be like if you did that? And in the wondering, there's a little bit of freedom. There's not the pressure of needing to know. And I really believe it's this lost art. And wondering, when you lose wondering, then you get, I truly believe, into this very narrow confine where your media, your news, what you hang out with becomes so narrow, but you don't know because you've stopped wondering, is there more beyond this part? And you just see what you're in.
So we're going to go really deep on this one. That becomes an issue of what we have done in culture. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm anti-science or I'm anti-this, but when we began to say that man was not created by a creator, we took wonder out of the existential, the foundational, okay? And we're now telling people there is no wonder at the core of humanity, at the core of physicality, at the core of existence. And now you have to find other ways to produce wonder. Whereas when we recognize that we're made in the image of someone and we're in the image of the one that created us, and we have intention and we have purpose, and Switchfoot says this, and I talked about this on another podcast, actually I was on yesterday, so not my own, with a gentleman by the name of Tim Bassanio. It's called Stand Up Dude, if anybody wants to find it. But Switchfoot has a song that says, without wonder, how can life be wonderful?
That's powerful.
I love that. So that's not mine. That's a Switchfoot lyric. But that idea that we have taken away wonder from the central core of existence is so, and we're seeing this over and over again. Almost every generation, it's getting worse and worse because we're moving further and further away from creator. And the interesting thing is that religion often basically says, go to Lord and Savior, right? And that's what you hear from people who are preachers. But when you take creator out of the equation, you lose the wonder. And it's harder to get to Lord and Savior because now it's just control. It's opportunity and then control, but you don't know why you want to give away control.
Right.
You don't know why you're doing this, but when you go, oh my gosh, this is how I was created. And so for me, it's getting into neuroscience. It's getting into body mechanics. It's understanding the way the body was made and being so enthralled by this, and then creating these revolutionary thoughts that connect back to wonder. And then people ask, where did that come from? And then you can point them back to the wonder giver.
Right. Absolutely. I was thinking about when you were saying about each generation, it's faster and faster and faster. And I think there's less space to wonder, or we say, don't daydream. Oh, stop getting lost in your head. All those things as a kid. And that's sometimes the most powerful moments is when we do get lost in our head, when we start to think about it. Like, even like if you look outside, just the wonder of the trees or all that stuff, like there are moments where I can allow myself to just exist. Now, does it look Practical? No. Does it look like I'm wasting time? Maybe. But that to me is part of the reason that we've lost it, is because we've put wonder into the category of wasting time. If you're not doing productive things, then are you wasting time? And we've forgotten that wonder is such a productive part of who we were created to be. It's the creator part, like you were saying. It's that cell, that imprint of who we are.
I love it. I love it. There is a author out there. He wrote a book called Why Religion Matters in the World's Great Religions. And he's not necessarily, he's very much a syncretist, or as far as his thoughts. So I'm not trying to promote this in one particular religion or not. But for him, he created a mantra out of a scripture reference. And he starts the day with "Be still and know that I am God." And then he goes to "Be still and know." And he meditates on that for a while. Then he goes to "Be still." And he meditates on that for a while. And then he goes to "Be."
That is unbelievably powerful.
Isn't that awesome?
I absolutely, there's so many layers to that. There's just so many layers. I love the word "no" in there. That's that third part where it's almost like releasing the layers of expectations that we have. When you get to the point of just be, then I think you're in your soul's alignment. Then you're in that spot of, this is who I am. Otherwise, there are many people saying you should do that and you should do that. And your own brain is always like, well, maybe not, maybe not. That critic voice, the skeptic voice. And it's silencing that so that you can hear your soul speak again.
Have you read Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art?
No.
Okay, so I recommend this book, and to every listener on here, he talks about resistance as this. And he says resistance is the thing. If you're ever going to do good in the world, resistance is going to come against you. And he talks about 40 plus different ways resistance thrives in trying to, he says it doesn't happen if you're just living life, if you're just kind of going through the motions. But as soon as you want to do something good, resistance is right there to thwart it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case, is that in many cases, resistance can be advertising. Resistance can be politics. Resistance can be all of these things because they don't want you to think for yourself. You become very difficult to categorize. You cannot be put into a box or a condition. Now, the cool thing is when you become somebody like that, you draw the same type of people to you. And that's why I'm so fortunate, even from the standpoint of you being on this podcast, is that your husband said, this is a different way of seeing the world. I want my wife to experience it because she is similar and these two are going to connect. So let me say this from this perspective. You mentioned river a little while ago. A river is nothing more than a hollowed out channel with a bunch of rocks in it. The water is not the river. The water is what flows through the river that the river contains. A river purifies itself on the broken condition of the rocks, which produces the minerals, which makes the water fresh. So the more broken you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more the river can flow through you. But here's what's really cool. What happens when one river connects to another river, or one stream connects to another river?
They get bigger.
Power, force, torrent. The combination of the two produces such a powerful event that it then creates the tidal currents. That is our goal in our lives, is to be that hollowed out channel that then contains, through that agenda, through that story, contains that agenda that finds other people, that produces torrents that change the world.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I can see when you have that light, when you have your spark, whatever you want, when you're in true alignment, you will inspire others. You don't even have to say anything all the time. It's through who you are. It's like the essence of you walking through a room. What's different? Something's different. I want to learn more about it. And I remember learning about, sometimes people have that power over strategy and people are very resistant to that. I don't want it, but if you can come underneath people, that power under, the supporting of people, that's the place where that, like you were saying, that river, where all of a sudden people are like, I want to join in. I want to live, whatever that is, I want to learn more about it. And that's the way most people learn the best. If it's, hammered down your throat. No, you're gonna resist. You're gonna push away. But to come and to live your life in alignment like that will inevitably attract others to that. What is that? What's that secret?
I love that. Power under. What's really fascinating is if you look at scripture, the people who controlled power, and there's a lot of ideas in kind of religious circles that we're supposed to take the mountains. We're supposed to take the 7 mountain strategy. We are supposed to be the leaders in media and the leaders in education and the leaders in science. They all failed in scripture. Saul, David, Solomon, Moses a little bit from that perspective. The ones that thrived were the ones who influenced the leaders, Daniel and Joseph. We're not supposed to be the heads. We're supposed to, in many cases, we are the heads inside ourselves, but we're not supposed to be the master over the thing. We're supposed to influence the masters. And what's really fascinating with Daniel is Daniel did this under incredible and Joseph as well, but Daniel especially under a really pagan king.
Yeah.
Right. And he says to him, he doesn't say, hey, when you're done and we get somebody that's really supposed to be in here, then everything's going to change. He says to him, "O king, live forever." Literally, you, Mr. Pagan King, right. I want you to live forever because I am influencing you, but yet you are the one who has been given this anointing, if you will. And so I'm recognizing that, but I'm also influencing what you're doing. And I think that's how we need to, it's a servant mentality. I used to joke around with people. I've been able to sit with very influential people in very influential meetings with another influential person. And I'm the guy that's sitting quiet in the corner taking notes. And often the influential person that I'm not there with, but the one that they're meeting, never recognizes me, never says anything about me in the meeting. I am like garnish on a deli plate in that conversation, right? As soon as that conversation is over and I get in the car with the person that I was meeting with, this hyper influential person, the very first thing they says is, "So now what should I do?"
Fascinating.
I didn't get any credit. I didn't get any glory. I didn't get any opportunity from it. And yet they recognize, and it's a sad place to be sometimes, but it's an amazing place to be when you see the impact of those moments happen in your life and you see the outcome of that. Because if I got the credit, I might have a big head and I might say, "Yeah, I did that." I was on the podcast yesterday and I said something that I thought was really profound and the person thought I was saying somebody else said it. And I was like, "Oh, should I correct him?" And I said, "No, I'll just let that other person." I know, and the person I was saying is a friend of mine too, that I said that he thought said it. And I was like, "I'll just give it to him." Right. It doesn't, what good is it going to do me to say, "Well, no, I was actually talking, I said that."
Right. Yeah. As a writer, and I'm assuming, you just illustrated that. I've had many things because I want, besides writing books, I think I would say one of my superpowers is writing quote, which is it's not the easiest thing I just love doing it because you can take a very big idea and put it down into something small and shareable where people instantly understand it. Distill it
into an axiom. Absolutely.
Yep. And in the world of social media, despite me putting my name on the bottom, many times people will remove it and share it, and readers will come back and say, "Hey, I saw it here." And it's this definite balance of running a business and being an entrepreneur and being a writer and an author, and this moment where I have to just go, I cannot control this. I have to realize that some of these words, they're just going to exist out there, and what needs to be done will come back to me where it needs to. But if I'm controlling everything, I'm not getting anything done. Or it creates this kind of angst, or it creates like, "Well, did you guys see me?" And then I'm not using my talents in the space where I should be using it. If I'm an encourager and all of a sudden I'm frustrated, well, the energy, the emotional level between the two of them, they don't work together very well.
I'm an ENFP. The way in which an ENFP is described is an inspirer or a manipulator. Oh. The inspirer is the redemptive side. The manipulator is the dangerous side. Until I was about 28 years old and I came to Nashville, Tennessee, and I met my wife, I was the dangerous side of an ENFP. I was really good at manipulation. I was really good at control. I was really good at getting what I wanted out of people. And I had a friend of mine, and sometimes it takes these shocks to the system, but I was out at a restaurant, and I was very much for all intensive words, a player. And I'm out at a restaurant with a pastor friend of mine because I was a Christian player,
Right,
as
right.
oxymoronic as that is. And I'm sitting there at this restaurant, and I'm probably looking over at somebody that I'm interested in getting a phone number of while I'm sitting there with this pastor. And he looks at me and he says, "You must be exhausted." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You spend your whole life trying to figure out what people want you to be. And so you're never in the conversation. You're always in your head trying to think, what should I say next? How do I do this? How do I get what I want out of this by saying the right thing in the moment?" He goes, "That's got to be so incredibly tiring for you, isn't it?"
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, dang,
Yeah, called
called
out.
out
Yeah.
completely, but in such a gracious way.
Right,
Now, it was
right.
asking me a question in that situation. And I think for so many of us, when we are in our heads, when we aren't in the B state,
Mm-hmm.
we are spending so much time, energy, and function that we're never fully present.
Being fully present is such a gift. It like you actually, when you said that moment, I've had that time too, where you're always thinking about what should I say next? What do I do? But I have this group of friends where we just sit together and we share things, but nobody gives a response back like, oh, have you thought about doing this? It's just a moment for each of us to share. And in that sharing, it allows that allowing to be present for the other person. And the person sharing, they know everybody's listening to them. They're not really thinking like, well, we're thinking that of what they're going to say next or the good solution or the good answer or all of that. It just allows that humanness part of us to be. And we don't teach those emotional skills often to kids. We don't teach like how to deal with emotions and how to recognize them and how to like understand them. Most kids, I think, believe like feeling I'm angry. They don't put the word I'm feeling angry or I'm overwhelmed. They don't say I'm feeling overwhelmed. Well, the interjection of feeling in there it removes you from that emotion to decide, you know what, I can make a different choice. I can choose a different emotion. I'm not angry. I'm not that, whatever that emotion is. But so often we identify immediately with the emotion versus recognizing we're experiencing that emotion.
You actually can live your life and never produce an emotion externally. And I don't mean hold it in internally. I mean, when a situation comes in your life, you can process it through your head, through your heart, make a decision not to allow it to occur, and it blows away in the moment. So you can be angry for a microsecond and you
Right.
feel it in your body, but it never releases. Emotion is nothing more than the physical representation. Like anger, it doesn't exist until it
Right.
manifests, right? The lie of the culture is that there is no time anymore between the instigating moment and the emotion that follows. And that processing time is crucial and critical to our lives because this is where road rage happens now. This is
Mm-hmm.
where shootings occur. This is where violence happens. And the problem with violence is it releases adrenaline in a way that feels good enough that we want to continue doing it, where we're supposed to be releasing dopamine and serotonin in moments in our lives that are empathetic and creative and
Right.
nuanced and compassionate. When we get thrills out of that, it actually impacts the body in such a more profound way.
Right.
And you're operating, just getting into the neuroscience side of it for a second, you're operating in the higher regions of the brain. But when you're angry and you're operating in the same regions of the brain that reptiles have.
The
So if you
amygdala.
want to be a human reptile,
Right.
just be an angry, bitter, fast to emotion person. If you want to be if you want to be a guru or just in B state, we're just going to call this B state. That's what I'm going to say from now on. It's just if you want to be a
Mm-hmm.
bee, if you want to be a bee,
Perfect.
Begin
Works.
to operate in those areas and get yourself to be rewarded. When you have somebody say, there's no greater thrill in my life than somebody say, what you said to me 6 months ago changed my life. That produces those moments in me. It may not be as strong as a drug that I take, but those repeated thrills of people saying that, or a drug that someone can take, not that I'm taking drugs, but that it's created such as a thrill that the body wants that again and again and rewards you over and over and over again. And you become a more enlightened, you are transformed by the renewing of your mind. You move from glory to glory.
Absolutely. 100%. It's interesting. Everything you said, I completely agree with. I remember when I was in high school, I first read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I loved it. Everybody else is reading all these books. I'm reading that in school. And one of his the habits was be proactive, not reactive. And it has stuck with me my entire life. Like, it's so easy to be reactive to everything. And so I've implemented this pause a lot of times, like just a breath before I go into that emotion. But it takes that effort. It takes going back to the beginning when we talked about running. It takes the ability to say, okay, maybe I can only pause for a microsecond. But in that, you're giving your brain a second to recalibrate. Like, even before you and I had this conversation, or before I go on a podcast or anything, I will take a minute or two and just be, using that term, breathe, get everything centered, and let go of what I don't need to carry with me. Because if I'm coming in with all of my emotion and baggage and all that, I'm not showing up my true self. It becomes weighted down by worries here and worries there. But that moment of that be still, if you're going to use both of them, that to me is being proactive. It's the pause. It's allowing your mind to calm for a second so that you can be and make that best choice. Going back to what you were saying about the reptilian brain, I took classes after college. I remember learning about that amygdala, that response, and he talked about road rage. And one of the things he said is people that get involved in road rage often are like, I don't know what came over me. Well, if you look back at the human response, maybe you have 18 choices after somebody cuts you off, but then when you go right into the next emotion, your choices don't drop down to 17. All of a sudden, your brain thinks, I have 9. And then you're getting even more mad. So then if you don't pause it again, your brain doesn't go down to 8, it goes down to 4. And then it goes down like that. And then all of a sudden, you're left with, well, I'm going to just swipe his car as an option, which 5 minutes ago would have never entered your brain. And that to me is the power of stepping back and pausing, of taking that breath before you go down that path, because that path can go very fast.
I love it. I love it. This has gone so fast. Believe it or not, we're on 45 minutes.
Woo,
but I want to take what you just said, because we went back to that whole be still part of things. And I was just writing this down as a formula. Be still and know that I am God operates in the religious. Mm-hmm. Be still and know operates in the wonder. Be still operates in effective body mechanics, and be operates in enlightenment.
That is very powerful. And I completely agree. Completely. Like, I get very emotional when I connect with something. I could feel the tears. Like, that is absolutely, I'm on that wavelength.
I've never written that. That's going to become a new Medium article for everybody who follows me on Medium. You're going to see that, because that to me, really, that's what first of all, thank you for joining, because I can't get to where I got today without you being part of this process. And that's what I love about this podcast and this is really what I do all day when I get the chance, when I'm not working, is I get on these phone calls and everybody says, why don't you just record them? So we're recording them now. So this is just like you and I having a phone call for 45 minutes.
That's exactly right.
Yes, absolutely. But let's just take a couple seconds or a couple minutes and why don't you, anything you want to say to this audience, or to share anything about what you're doing or anything like that, you have the floor for the next however long.
Okay. Well, thank you. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I loved the part about be still and all of that, because that's been part of my story for over 20 years, specifically that verse. So when you came up with that, I was like, oh my goodness, it's a full circle. I think I just like for me as a writer, storyteller, all of that, but as a real encourager of people, I just want to have people take that step back and to look at this gift of creativity that we have, the internet, the writing, all that, as being entrepreneurs, whatever it be, musician, And I think sometimes we forget the thousands and thousands of years of our ancestors who fought for us to be able to have this place in our lives where we could have this voice, where we can get on and you and I can have a conversation and we can share it and we can share it with people and inspire people and change lives. And when we forget, it's when we allow our quick response, or we don't look at the other person responding to something we wrote online with we don't step back. We lose that humanity. And I just want to say, like, let's remember the humanity, but let's honor when we remember to respond in grace and when we remember to really embrace our soul's journey and to step into who we were created to be. We're not only honoring our ancestors and everybody that fought for where we are now, we are also creating a path for the next generation. We are modeling what it's like to live in alignment, to create connections, to live out of love, to support each other, and to be a culture of people that loves each other and is the type of people that come underneath like that power under and supports each other.
I love it. I love it. Now I'm going to give you a minute to just promote anything you want as far as what you're doing. Hopefully we have a strong captive audience here. And how can they connect with you?
Well, most people find me at findingjoy.net, but my newest book, Get Your Spark Back, I'm very passionate about it because I really think many people get to a place in life where they're like, this isn't what I thought life would be like. People never put in their yearbook, you know, it'd be great when I'm 40, I'm going to go through a divorce. That'd be fun. Like, we all have these journeys. And it's really about, how do I get back to my true soul, to who I'm created to be? And what do I do to not only reignite that spark within me, but to live out that life, keeping it lit? And how do I inspire others to do the same? So yeah, you can get the book, Amazon, Books A Million, anywhere books are sold.
I love it. I love it. You know, there's a Switchfoot song. I've talked about this on the last podcast, and the one that I was just on with Stand Up Dude, as they say. And it's the Switchfoot lyric that says, we were meant to live for so much more. Have we lost ourselves? Now, that's a really cool statement, but here's the thing. No other ideological system can say you were made for more. Because we're made in the image of the one that created us, and therefore we bear that image, and there is a desire for that creator to see us flourish because it brings him glory. The glory of God is man fully alive, as Saint Irenaeus said. Right?
Amen. Mm-hmm.
Every other system can say you can do more, you can be more. That's where self-help gurus come in. That's where motivational speakers come in. That's where gurus and you know and wise sages come in. We're the only ones that can say, you're made for me.
So true. So true. I have nothing to add to that. So beautiful. And it's such a good, potent reminder, is it takes it off our shoulders in that moment. Then when we step into it.
It brings hope.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's a tangible, tactile hope. And I think that's what, if there's anything maybe this world needs, besides empathy, I think empathy is a key, but I think hope is another one. So absolutely. Well, this has been, Rachel, it's been an absolute blast. Not just a fun talk, but just a blast of a talk. So thank you so much for participating. And yeah, I have nothing else to say either. I'm filled for the day. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Maybe take a nap.
It was awesome. I think I'm going to go for a run because that's what I do.
There you go. All right. Well, I used to joke around that I could barely run water, let alone run a mile. So, but I created a little promotion on me. I created an exercise product that you use in a pool, and it's allowed me to get my weight back and my health back. And so maybe I'll mention that a little while later on another podcast on what that is. But yeah, so thank you again, Rachel. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So now that this podcast has been going for a while, I just want to do a little bit of self-promotion and say, well, there's two ways that you can get a hold and learn more about who I am and what I'm doing. The first one is my website at www.davidwlitwin.com, where you're going to learn all sorts of things about what I'm doing, from the creative to the inspiring to the literary to games to all sorts of things. I got a lot of things going on in my head and in my life, and I just love for you to participate and share in that. And then secondly, you can read my work at medium.com/the @ David W. Litwin. And I put a lot of these thoughts from the podcast and other things that I think about there. So it's another way you can connect with me. I love engaging people. So please come in and enjoy that time and spend a little bit of time with me, and I would love it. So thank you again.